Give us this day our daily bread.
Behold the Lamb of God. Behold him who takes away the sins of the world.
Drew, what you doing?
In our first two reflections that we did together, we talked about how important anger is, not only to God, to Jesus, but to ourselves, that anger does rob us of happiness, and how much God really does want that happiness for us and wants us to know that vulnerability that's in us and how much we're able to hurt each other through the anger that is there. We talked about the causes of anger. We talked about different divisions of anger. We talked about different kind of distinctions we had. And then we talked about anger itself. Well, today, what we want to talk about most is anger at other people, and then the one that surprises a lot of people, and that's anger at God. Those two are very crucial. When we talk about being angry with others, we probably have to start where we live, closest to us. Most of our anger and much of our hurt is from the people we love the most and the people closest to us. And as we said in an earlier reflection, by loving them, we have made ourselves vulnerable. So they have the ability to hurt us more than other people. And we have the ability to hurt them more than other people. So one of the most important things we have to look at is just where is anger in my immediate life and in my family? Do I add to a climate of peace that we're going to reflect on later? Do I subtract from it? Do I create an atmosphere in the home that is really peaceful? Because that anger at the people closest to us, and sometimes it's right in the house where we live, but sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's a brother, a sister, an in-law, sometimes it's a really close friend. With any of those angers, we have to be extremely sensitive because they're the ones where we're most concerned about their happiness. And in some sense, we're most responsible for their happiness. So we want to start in our kind of examining our life and looking at anger at others. We want to start there because that's crucial. And sometimes we pass that up because we want to say, well, I want to talk about the people who hurt me. Now, sometimes we have to start with just the house. Where do I live? With whom do I live? And am I creating a place that is really affirming, supportive, happy? The second group that we need to talk about anger at others are sometimes people we don't know at all because they're so different from us. And there's this anger that's connected to fear. And we didn't talk about that in the first two sessions, but we need to here. Much of the anger in our country right now is connected to fear. And whether it's angry at immigrants, whether it's angry at people between different races, you know, black and white and all that confusion that goes on between the races and all the anger, a lot of that's based on fear. And it doesn't have to just be black or white. Sometimes the difference is a difference in politics or a difference in religion. And, you know, sometimes we fear for our kids and where are they in, what are they getting into. Sometimes we fear where the country's going because we don't like this person's politics or this person that got elected or this one that didn't get elected or whatever else. The fear is connected to hurt in this sense, that the fear is saying, if this person moves into my neighborhood, is this going to change my neighborhood? Is it going to threaten me? You know, I've often used an example that many people would say, you know, I really don't have a prejudice against black people in the sense that if a black dentist and his wife and children moved in next door, I have no problem. But if the kid moves in next door where he wears his pants halfway down to his knees with dreadlocks and loud music coming out of the car in the driveway all the time, all of a sudden my world is shaken. My world is a little frightened. And that fear turns into an anger and a hostility. And we need to name that, and we need to see that connection. Because if God is going to lead us, as we talked about in the first two sessions, if he's going to lead us on this journey from hostility to hospitality, from anger at people to creating a climate of happiness for all of us around each other, we need to deal with those angers that are based on fear. Now maybe we need to go to the one that we think of most, and that's the anger at the people who hurt us. And as I mentioned earlier, the hurts can be real or the hurts can be perceived, but the hurts are there. And when the hurts are there, we really have to come back to that distinction we made earlier between the feelings of anger and the decision to be angry. The feelings are going to be there. When people hurt us, especially if it's an ongoing hurt, and you run into this a lot in families, you run into this a lot where you love your husband or your wife, but one of their parents, one of the in-laws, just has really never accepted you as part of the family. And there's always, almost every Christmas or every Easter or whatever time you get together, there's that little innuendo, that little jab, little zinger that's shot across the table that causes grief and pain. Ongoing hurt is one of the most difficult things to deal with, because so many people will say to me, I want to forgive them, but I can't get past the feelings. I can't get past the hurt. I can't get past the anger. And just when I say I've got it all put to rest, it all comes back again because there's a new zinger shot across the table. and a new holiday to put up with. Those are particularly difficult. And those are the ones where we need to really wrestle most and say, how do I get to forgiveness of this person? All right, first, forgiveness is a decision, not a feeling. If I decide I want to forgive this person, I have forgiven them in God's eyes. The feelings of anger, the feelings of hurt may be there for another 20 years, especially if it's ongoing. But I have said, I choose. I don't want to react. I want to respond. And my choice is to add to happiness. My choice is to forgive. Now, how do I do that? We come back to compassion. Compassion is trying to get in touch with the sadness. Now, this time, it's not compassion for myself, like when we talked about anger itself. Now I'm talking about compassion for other people. I've used a quote often. I've used it if some of you have heard me reflect on the journeys of the spiritual life and love of others. I use this quote from Longfellow, and I come back to it so often because it's so insightful. Longfellow says, if we could read the secret histories of our enemies, we would find in their lives sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. That is such a powerful quote. If we could read the secret histories of these people we're so angry at, if I knew what my mother-in-law, who can just be a shrew and drives me up a wall, if I had some sense of what she's been through, if I could read her secret history, and she'll never tell me because she doesn't respect me enough to tell me, and she probably won't tell me because she isn't in touch with it herself, and it's why she's so angry at the rest of the world and me for marrying her son. But if I could read her secret history, I would find in her life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. Because as we reflected in an earlier session, all of us, every one of us, has had enough loneliness, hurt, misunderstanding, pain in our life. We don't need to add any more. And if we can read those secret histories of our enemies, Longfellow had a great insight there, and I hope we'll always listen to him. Now let's talk about anger at God. Why this is so important is so many people are angry at God and don't even know it. But it makes such a difference in their happiness and such a difference in their life. They can't say it out loud that they're angry at God, but there's just a coolness to the relationship. Now, for some people, because it's so common, some people will be very angry at a closer to the top, closer to the surface, and they can feel it. they feel the anger at God, and they know it, and they'll voice it. Other people can't do that. They're a little afraid to admit they're angry at God. And what they do is, it's just a kind of a distancing. They just kind of distance themselves from God. They just pray less. They're not as close to Him. They don't trust Him the same way. They're not sure they like Him, but they don't really know exactly what to do. They're just disillusioned, they're disappointed, and it does rob them of their happiness, because it gives them a very deep loneliness. It's a different loneliness than just being alone. When we sense that we don't like God, and we're angry at Him, and we think that He might be angry back. He isn't, but we think He is. It places us in a very alone place. And as a priest, when I work with people who are dealing with that, sometimes they haven't even sensed that that's where the problem is, that they are that angry. Because, like I said, they can't quite admit it to themselves, and they just move away. But they know something is empty, something is missing, something is lonely, and they're not quite sure where to go. Even with depression, depression obviously is an emotional illness. But most people feel that a significant part of depression in many, many people is a spiritual problem, not simply a mental one. And I don't mean that, well, now we've got to judge people with depression that they're sinful. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying there's a disillusionment with God. There's a disillusionment. He's not taking care of me. He's not watching out for me. A feeling of a loneliness and distancing from Him. And the more we can work on helping the depressed person deal with that part of it, that there's a small part of it that is this connection to their God and to themselves and to the depth of who they are and their prayer life, that feeds into the other elements of the depression that might be chemical or might be emotional or any of the other elements that go into depression. People who are angry at God often feel betrayed by someone they trusted. They trusted that God would take care of them. They trusted that God would take care of the people they loved. They always prayed for their child's safety, and their child became very ill, or their child died. And they're not just disillusioned, they just feel betrayed. Where was He? Where is God? What is going on? And that brings us to some of these causes for anger at God. One of the biggest causes of anger at God is the death of a loved one. Because we know death is part of life, but we're never ready to give up someone that we love and need. And when we're sure God could have done something about that, why did God take this person? And that hurt so many people and causes so much anger. We'll come back to that. Self-pity is another reason to be angry at God. I've alluded often to this thought that people feel gypped because of comparisons. So many people do feel gypped in life. I'm not as talented. I'm not as blessed. I don't have as much. I'm not as gifted. I don't have as many friends. When that moves into this kind of ongoing self-pity, then it's easy to just really get aggravated at God. He should have seen that. He should have done something different. Another cause for anger at God is feeling controlled by God. So many people see religion as control, when really the whole work of God is our happiness and our freedom. No one wants our freedom like our God, but people who feel that God is controlling them. He's controlling their behavior. He's controlling how they fit into their church. And then if you add to it that someone in the church is controlling, that will also do it. Many people's anger at God is those of us who work for God. You know, some priest hurt them. Some priest said something to them 30 years ago. And they're not only angry at the priest, they're angry at anything connected to religion, including God. I don't want anything to do with any of it. And maybe it's why I told you at the beginning, in the very first reflection that we did together, that I was so angry as a little kid and decided when I was ordained that we had our quota of angry and crabby priests. We didn't need another one, and I needed to work at that. Well, that's real, because we priests have an immense ability to hurt people, more than we know, because we put our pants on one leg at a time, like everybody else, and we know we're very human, and we take ourselves for granted. But when people have put us on a pedestal, they have allowed us the ability to really hurt them. And sometimes it's the smallest comment, but anger at a priest can very quickly move toward anger at religion and anger at God. All right, how do we heal all this? Where do we go with this? The first thing, I'll repeat again something I've said so many times in this community. No man, woman, or child can let loose of a feeling until that feeling has been heard, understood, appreciated, and respected. No one. If you've got a balloon on your lap and I tell you let loose of it, you can take your hands off, but if the bottom third of that balloon's full of water, it's not going anywhere. It's going to sit there. Well, that's what our feelings are. When our feelings are that balloon with the bottom third filled with water, until someone very delicately can listen to that hurt And they have to hear both. They have to hear the hurt and the anger. Sometimes we just hear the person's anger. We always have to go beyond that. Whether it's a husband, a wife, a parent, a child, a priest, a counselor, a teacher. We have to say, if they're angry, there's a hurt back there. What is it? Until that hurt and that anger are heard, understood, appreciated, respected, honored, the person can't let go of it. We can tell them to. They might want to. They can't do it. That's the beginning. That's the only way we can possibly get past the anger at others, or the anger at God, or even the anger at ourselves. The second gift, I guess I have to call it a gift of God for healing anger, is gratitude. Gratitude is the penicillin of the spiritual life. Gratitude is the wonder drug. It's the aspirin, the penicillin, the chemo, whatever we need. We know what we need for our bodies. Gratitude is the antidote. It's the penicillin. It's the medicine. I can't be grateful and angry at the same time. It does not work. You can't do it. One reason I'm convinced that God has given us the Eucharist as Catholics as the center of our life and the center of our prayer is that Eucharist is thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the answer to so many sins, especially anger. Gratitude is it. If we get in a habit of gratitude every day and say, God, I'm dealing with anger. I'm aiming for gentleness. I'm praying for gentleness. But if every day I spend some time focusing on gratitude, gratitude to you, gratitude for my spouse, gratitude for my family, gratitude for my kids, my parents, gratitude for my health, gratitude for my life. I can't feel grateful and gypped. I can't feel grateful and angry. They go together. It just heals everything. The third way to heal anger is to work at our images of God. So many of us are trying to live our adult life with a third-grade God. This image of God that controls everything just causes so many problems. God is not a resident policeman controlling my life. God does not send sickness. God does not send death. Why would God send sickness and then send Jesus to heal it? That's a contradiction. Why would he send death and send Jesus to overcome it? Death and sickness are evils, and we don't know the mystery of evil. But God does not send it. We have to keep working on an adult God. If you said to me, well, then why does all this happen? Well, if you're going to ask me to explain the mystery of evil, I can't do that. You have to get somebody smarter up here to do that. But I can tell you this. Our own experience is that love is the most powerful thing in the world. It changes history. It changes our lives. If we have everything in the world and our spouse dies, who cares about the big house? Who cares about the car? Who cares about the vacation we planned? Who cares about the cruise we were going to go on? None of it makes any difference because love has been removed. Love changes everything. Andrew Lloyd Webber said in one of his songs, love changes everything. Love changes history. It's the most powerful force we know. It can create human life. It can pull out wonderful things from our children. It can invite them into a productive, mature adulthood. But love is also powerless. Because love can't control. Love can't dominate. Love can't manipulate. You, as parents, know no matter how much you love your kids, you can't protect them from some things. Love is all powerful. You gave them life, and you pulled them to adulthood. And love is vulnerable and powerless at the same time. And God is perfect love. Therefore, in some mysterious way, God is all-powerful, which is part of our creed, and in some strange way is all-powerless. There are things in nature and in us that God has given freedom, and He has rendered Himself powerless by giving us that freedom and giving nature the same freedom He has given us. There are things that happen that this all-powerful God, in His love and gift of freedom, has rendered Himself powerless. Can I explain all that? No. Do I pretend to understand it all? No. But I know it's true. I know it's real. And I know until we deal with an adult God, until we deal with that mystery of God's love, we will never be fully healed of the anger that we sometimes feel at Him. It's a long process. The process of moving, like I said, from anger to gentleness, from marveling, from being angry that I was not my best self all the time, to marveling that the good side of me is around it all, from being angry at people to seeing the pain in the secret histories of their lives, from being angry at God to seeing the wonderful, vulnerable, humble God who loves us more than we could ever imagine. Those are such long journeys, but they're worth it, because the end of the journey, if we make that journey, is happiness, and that's what we want. Thank you.